Ace-Jack suited, we're not giving up so easily. And 10-8 is a loose open raise, but I think it works well. Again, I'm playing a little bit looser, of course, because I think I have a skill edge. I'm not playing quite as loose as I would be because I'm trying to teach you guys how to play, right? Not just showing you how I would maximize my EV in this game. But 10-8, sometimes it's an open, sometimes it's a fold. In these more passive games, you can raise a little bit more often. So I like my open raise so far. And again, the small blind, just like a few minutes ago, doesn't have a full stack and flatted, so he may be on the weaker side. Who knows? And on King 4-4, I don't mind just checking behind. We have no pair, no draw, no backdoor draw really, so I don't mind giving up. And guys, and just because we check like the flop doesn't mean we can't win the hand on later streets. We can still improve to an 8 or a 10, right? We can still bluff our hand later. So just because you check doesn't mean you've given up. You can still win. So we get checked. We get checked to by both players, and normally you wouldn't really bet a hand like this. You'd only have equity, and I would expect players to be quite tricky. But here, I would expect my opponents to mostly lead their good hand. So even with a hand like this, which doesn't really have equity and doesn't really block anything special, I guess the small blind can have pocket eights. I guess you can have king 10. So your blockers matter a little bit, but not that much. But even with not much equity, if your opponents are just telling you like, hey, take the pot, it's up for grabs, just take it. Ace-Jack suited could be 4-bet as well, but I don't mind calling. And it's going very quickly now. And so we call, and the big blind checks on a terrible board for him because the button could have some sets, he can have some straights, I can have overpairs, I can have flush draws. Maybe I sometimes hit this board as well. So he has to be quite careful here. With ace-jack suited, I wouldn't really bet often. We kind of block hands that are just going to fold. Hands like queen-jack of diamonds would often squeeze pre-flop and then just check fold the flop, right? So we don't really have much equity. We don't have much backdoor equity. It's not like we block things well. So at least if we have like a 7 or an 8, we have some equity. We also block the nuts. We block our opponent's nuts. We don't really have anything going on for us. So as a general tip, guys and girls, of course, if you're listening, whenever you have no equity, almost no equity at all, and it's a spot where you can't go too crazy, give up with the hands that have almost no equity. Just because you've given up on the flop doesn't mean you can't win on later streets, right? It doesn't mean you can't improve. And now your seemingly no equity hand is pretty good. So here, yeah, if we turn a jack, we have the best hand often, right? But we can't just count on a jack. Pocket eights are always open raises, of course, in middle position. And Jack 9-7 is a tricky board to play, especially being a bit deeper. I expect my opponent to have 9s and 7s and maybe even jacks sometimes. I expect them to have hands like ace 10 suited and all kinds of good hands. So I'm quite careful on this board. He checks behind, which means a lot of those hands are partially eliminated. And he could have pocket sixes as well. I wouldn't hate if I end up betting for value and protection, but I think checking is even better. And button bets here with ace-jack suited. We just got to fold. Yes, we beat a couple of hands, but we just don't really have the equity to call there. And on the king, I think we should just end up checking. I don't think we can get value very easily. I don't think he's folding many better hands. Maybe he folds in like 10-9 suited to a river bet, but I'd rather just take another hand to bet with rather than pocket eights. We have so many hands that have very little showdown value, whereas pocket eights is still going to win a decent amount of the time. We're probably winning at showdown like half the time. And 5s make sense. It's loose by him, but I don't really hate it. I don't really hate the flat call. I don't think it's a winning play. I think we should be playing 3-bet or fold in that spot, but it's not terrible, so I'm not going to make a note. Now, if he had a hand like 5-4 offsuit, I would make a note like flat, cold calls extremely wide in position. So I know his range is weak. But pocket 5s is a decent flat calling hand. And with 10-8, we river a pair. They've both checked with us. We don't really have a good kicker, so we have a decent hand. I'd like to see just a small bet here to get a crying call out of ace high or pocket fives. I don't really see them calling much if we bet big. Which means that if we do have nothing, bluffing here is probably going to make us quite a bit of money. So I don't mind the small bet here. Again, you see a lot of exploitative bet sizes and lines, and a very tough player could run me over a little bit, but I know that these types of counter strategies will not be used very often, so I'm not too bothered. Aces, I mean, I think you guys know what to do. Raise it up. And queen 7 suited against a 3x open raise size, I would be defending a very, very tight range. Queen 7 suited is one of the hands in that tight range that I would still defend, even with the high rake. And queen 9 suited, easy open raise. And MP as well. Under the gun would be loose, but decent as well. And here again with queen 4, I'm happily seeing a flop. Villain checks behind with on queen 9-4, which is okay. So on the turn, I don't really mind a bet. I don't really mind a check. Our hand is good, but not incredibly good. What I've seen so far playing these games, and of course I've got to admit I don't play these games very often, is that when people take a weak line, a passive line, they don't really handle aggression. So I think when I lead here, I will get a ton of folds. So I don't mind checking a hand like this sometimes, which means I protect my checking range. So next time, so when he delays c-bets, I don't just check fold everything. And it's also quite deceptive, right? And I don't think I get a ton of value here. So I don't mind just checking here sometimes. I like it. And with queen 4, again, happily seeing a flop, similar to the jack 4 hand. And I would check all the reasonable bet on the flop, obviously, having, second pair. And on the turn, we have trips now. Let's not we could talk about this spot for like an hour, but let's not complicate things too much. I think checking sometimes is good in order to be deceptive. You unblock all of villain's bluffs, basically, having a 4 in your hand. So I don't really mind checking, but betting would be the standard play. And again, we would be a little bit exploitable, but against a lot of opponents, that's okay. And with queen 7, I think now it's time to value bet, get value from the middle pair or maybe ace high. I like it. 6-4 suited. I'll be limping. So here, this is probably another common question. I haven't received any questions, so it's tough to imagine which types of questions I'll get. But this is a very common situation where you see villains limp, and you ask yourself, how often do we over limp with small blind? And I would mostly say try and avoid over limping with hands that are unplayable and dominated, right? So a hand like this, definitely I would limp because our 6 and our 4 are not that dominated, and our hand is suited and connected, so it's quite playable, right? But if I had a hand like King 7 offsuit here, for instance, I would definitely just fold, especially factoring in the rake. Yeah, definitely like to see an overcall here. And with queen 9, we check multi on this flop. We have a perfect medium strength hand to check. I would also check much stronger hands here. And we get it led into by Poker Boy from the big blind, and I think we should just end up folding. When he leads like this, I think he's probably saying, I've got a hand like a king, something like that. We could be dead already, and even if we're not dead, our opponent is just going to bet a lot of rivers, and there's just not many rivers on which we can fight back. So I'd like to see a fold. It's tight, but as you've seen, a lot of villains are not very aggressive here, so being a hero and calling down super light is not the best way to make money. I like it. So in this spot, small blind versus button, I would only 3-bet or fold. Again, there's some merits to flat calling, but paying so much rake is not attractive. Also, I would expect a lot of villains to overfold to 3-bets, making 3-betting a bit more attractive. I also expect the big blind to not 4-bet too aggressively, which again, is nice because it means we don't have to call too many 4-bets out of position or, fold against them. So I like this 3-bet. And villain call with ace jack. So he's probably thinking we defend a lot of random hands like, 7-5 suited that he beats. And he's probably thinking, well, he blocks hands like jack 9 and ace 9 that we may be checking the turn with and bluffing the river with. And, he has virtually the nut-no pair. I mean, technically he has a second nut-no pair, but since we never have ace king anyway, because we would always 3-bet, he basically has the nut-no pair. I don't hate his call, but I think he should be raising a bit smaller pre-flop, and I think he should be betting pretty aggressively on this board. This board is still quite good for him and quite dry. And 6-4 suited, under the gun ends up betting here. And again, he has to be careful, right? Because bonus baller is just going to check every 3 in the big blind, basically. So he's going to have trips very often. He's also going to have a 5 a lot. So when the under the gun player bets here, he's telling me he limped an overpair sometimes, or he's just betting a random hand. 6-4 suited is not the worst hand to be check raising here, having an overcard and an open ender. And I don't expect under the gun to have many 3s, so I'm not too concerned about that. I'm more concerned about a hand like aces or kings. But even against those hands, we're doing okay. We, of course, have to be careful because the big blind is still in the pot. Cutoff, I'm not too worried about. Yeah, maybe he limped hand like 6s behind, but I'm not too worried about him. I'm not too worried about him having too many 3x. I don't mind this. And he just folds. That was a little bit anticlimactic. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this first video at NL5. The next videos are going to be at higher stakes, and I think I covered everything I wanted to cover regarding exploiting weaker players, reading into their strategies, keeping it simple, avoiding the rake as much as possible, playing quite tight on defense, but being quite offensive in general, and trying to push these guys around a little bit. So if I were you and you're trying to learn from this video, just watch it a few times. And I'm saying this at the end of the video, but watch it a few times, make notes, and try to basically copy some of the things I'm doing. And in the beginning, you may not fully understand what you're doing, but as you go along, of course, you will learn more when you improve your understanding of the game.